Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you, and welcome back to Join the Mahdi. And as always, I'm Ardijan and Mahdi.
And I'm Alexandra Mahdi.
So today we're going to be talking about a topic which many people in the Western world don't particularly believe in, but it's actually something that is actually a big part of their faith if they look into it. And the topic that I'm talking about right now is a topic of life after death. No, I don't mean paradise. I don't mean hellfire. I mean the bringing back to life of an individual through a process that many people of Eastern philosophy and religion would call reincarnation.
Yeah.
So this is a very, very lengthy topic. It's something that for sure we will not be able to delve completely into today. There's just proofs after proofs, and it's a big topic. Alex, maybe we could start off by what is reincarnation? How does it work?
Yeah, it's a really big topic actually, and we had a question about this yesterday, so we decided to do an episode on it. And this is a topic, that people, when they hear that we believe in reincarnation and that Abu Sadiq from Him Peace is teaching that reincarnation is true and it's actually always been a part of the Abrahamic faiths, this is something which shocks a lot of people, and it causes them to, often argue against that point, But actually the evidence that Abu Sadiq has provided, proves that, non-refutably reincarnation has actually always been a part of all of the religions. So reincarnation is the belief that, souls, they reincarnate into different bodies. So they have more than one life or incarnations on this earth, basically. That is what the belief in reincarnation means. And so we believe, that the souls that has several lifetimes, it reincarnates across several lifetimes before ultimately going to Judgment Day and ending up in either heaven or hell.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a belief that we hold. It's a belief that Buddhists and Hindus hold. I mean, the process of reincarnation.
Yeah.
But however, unfortunately, many of the Abrahamic faiths fail to see reincarnation as a true belief. This is a vast majority of them. However, according to us, the followers of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, it's actually a great lesson. It's a great teaching in our faith, and the Goal of the Wise mentions it extensively, really, the book that we hold sacred.
Yeah, so there's a chapter on reincarnation in the Goal of the Wise, and this gives a background information, on what the teachings are. And Abu Sadiq from His Peace has also spoken about the topic across several episodes, and he's explained lots of different aspects. We probably won't have time to go into them all today, but, we also believe, and Abu Sadiq from His Peace has explained that, not only do we reincarnate into different bodies, but there's also something which is called the transmigration of the soul, basically.
Yeah, which is something we can get into another time, because it's even deeper than this aspect of reincarnation.
Sure, and we also believe, that the souls don't just reincarnate into human bodies; they also reincarnate into animal bodies and also inanimate objects.
Yeah.
So there's all of these different aspects, basically, to the topic of reincarnation.
Yeah. So basically, like whatever you could really imagine and think of, you can pretty much return as. You can return back as a human being, or you could return back as a plant or an animal, or even an inanimate object that people think are inanimate, like rocks. Even
a rock, which is it's shocking. And so there's this belief in Islam, basically, of the Raja, basically, or the resurrection, right? Where Muslims, they believe that the souls are going to come, or not the souls, the bodies are actually going to come out of the earth, basically, at a specific time. And so Abu Sadiq from Whose Peace has explained that what this was referring to was not the bodies actually coming out of the graves, which is unrealistic, and it would go against all of the natural laws that exist. So what this is actually referring to is the return of souls, and we're living actually in the time of a big return right now. Basically, we're living in a time that has been prophesied by the Ahlul Bayt in many narrations, actually, where all of the good souls have returned, and also all of the bad souls. So all of the souls who have reached the epitome of faith have returned, and all of the souls that have reached the epitome of disbelief have returned.
Yeah, and Abu Sadiq mentions this in the Goal of the Wise, actually. If we could pull up the slide regarding the quote from the Goal of the Wise, this is the hadith on the board that we just saw now is a hadith that we can also find in the Goal of the Wise. Abu Sadiq from His Peace references. We can pull it back up on the screen that, whoever does not believe in their return, or the return of the Ahlul Bayt, they are basically not upon this matter. I'm just kind of paraphrasing the narration. So yeah, whoever does not believe in our return is not from us. So that's a narration from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. It's a very serious one because now it's basically equating that those who claim to be Shias cannot be Shias unless they believe in our return, meaning that they would have to come back to this world. So yeah, let's take a look at an excerpt from the Goal of the Wise. It states that, and this is the writings of Abu Sadiq from the Missed Peace, what he said. He said that the Ahlul Bayt from the Missed Peace have mentioned some of the prophets and messengers and companions by name in various traditions as ones who will return in the time of the Qa'im. From those names are the 7 sleepers. Now, mind you, Qa'im is basically the Mahdi. It's basically this savior figure that appears in the end times according to Islam, for those who are unfamiliar. And these are the people that will return, basically, as they're calling it, the Raja, the return. From those names are the 7 sleepers, which are the 7 cave sleepers found in Christianity and Islam. Joshua, the son of Nun, who was the successor of Prophet Moses. Al-Miqdad, Malik al-Ashtar, and Salman al-Farsi, and Ardijan and Al-Ansari, companions of Imam Ali, basically. Al-Mufaddal ibn Omar, a companion of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, and many others. These are just a few from a plethora of narrations from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, mentioning the concept of the return or the raja. So yeah, this is very important that Abu Sadiq brings this up because he's basically putting it upon the people, he's putting it upon the believers of the Ahlul Bayt that they cannot escape this knowledge, they cannot escape this belief because it's embedded in their religion, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they deny it, then they denied Ahlul Bayt, basically.
Yeah, for sure. This is why the first narration that we went to says whoever denies our return is not from us, you know, because this is the belief in reincarnation. It has actually always been a part of the religion, you know. And the reason that it's been lost is because people have been following these people who are not appointed by God, who have misinterpreted the meanings of these concepts like the return. They've misinterpreted the verses and all of the narrations, you know, to talk about a physical resurrection, when actually, you know, it was always taught in reincarnation, and this is something which has existed in all of the Abrahamic faiths, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to just basically review our own beliefs and review ourselves. Why is it that we deny reincarnation? Is it something that the Ahlul Bayt or Muhammad or Jesus or Moses, did they deny reincarnation? And if they didn't deny it, then why do we fight against it? Why do we not take it as a belief, or at least entertain the thought of reincarnation? And I think we should just go over some of the narrations that now talk about reincarnation. If we could pull up some of the slides, we can find, like, for example, here, where Abu Basir, who's a companion of Imam al-Sadiq, and Imam al-Baqir, who said that, you know, Imam al-Baqir said to me, he asked me, he said, do the people of Iraq deny the raja, which is basically what, as we're saying, the return, it's reincarnation, the return of the past people. So I said to him, yes, meaning yes, they deny it. So he, alayhi salam, said, haven't they read the Quran in which it states, and the day when we will gather from every nation a group? So the Imam is basically saying that this Quranic ayat in chapter 27 of the Quran, verse 83, confirms reincarnation, that they will take from each former people a group. So that by itself is a proof, and they used it as a proof 1,400 years ago for reincarnation in the Quran. If we could go maybe to the next slide, we could find more. This is in the book Uyun al-Akhbar. This is a big Shia book, and Bihar al-Anwar, obviously, where Al-Ma'mun al-Abasi questioned Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, the 8th Imam of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. What do you say about the raja, or the return? So Imam al-Rida, he said, it is the truth and was present with the past nations, and the Quran spoke of it, and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had said, this nation shall have all what the past nations had the example of, sandal by sandal and arrow by arrow. So basically the raja, it's said to have existed before.
Yeah.
So and it says here
it was present with all the past nations.
Yes, exactly. It was present with all the past nations. So if it was present with all the past nations, this does not mean, you know, as some of the Shias may understand it to be, because what do some of the Shias say, Alex? They say that the raja basically means that the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt and any of these companions that we just mentioned, what's going to happen is that in the day of the return, They're going to pop out of their graves. They're going to dust themselves off. If they're missing a head, their head is going to probably regenerate, or they're going to place their heads back on their shoulders, and that they're going to go and fight, and they're going to give victory to the Mahdi. This is the belief that many of the Shias have. However, the Ahlul Bayt are saying here that no, the Raja is like the Raja of the past nations, and there is no recording of any prophet, messenger, righteous one popping out of their graves to give a prophet or messenger victory in their times. Unless maybe they return in a new body, which, by the way, has been preached in the Abrahamic faiths and has been preached in the Eastern faiths as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
and so what it's saying as well is that the return is happening in every day and age, right? In every day and age, there is a return. The souls are being, they're constantly returning to the earth, basically. But yeah, like I was saying before, we're at the moment living in that time when all of the souls have returned. So basically, every single soul has returned in this day and age for the prophesied battle between light and darkness. So this is like a time which is never going to be repeated. So there's never going to be another age where every single person has returned. We have all of the past villains, they've returned, like Pharaoh, Pontius Pilate, Nimrod, and basically all of the villains that we remember, from the history of the Abrahamic faiths, and also the past prophets and messengers have all returned in this day and age, in order to give victory to the Mahdi, in order to support Abu Sadiq, from him his peace, because this is the time when the light will be given the victory over the darkness. So the Qaim, he is with all of these returned souls, basically, in this time, and the purpose of this is to establish a divine just state, like I said, and to oppose and end the ideology of Iblis. So yeah, this is an extremely important time, which is never going to happen again.
Yeah, because in this time, just as some of the narration stated, and this is something Abu Sadiq mentioned, he said that this Raja is a particular Raja, it's a particular return that will never repeat again. And this is the return of all the prophets, messengers, and the evil ones, as you stated. And actually, there are narrations from the family of Muhammad that confirm all of that. We can pull up the next slide so we can actually see this narration, where it basically says that Ibn Abi Umair narrated from Al-Mufaddal, who heard it from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, or Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, about the saying of Allah the Almighty, on that day we shall gather a crowd from every nation. So what is the meaning behind that, basically? So he alayhi salam, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, said, there is not a single believer who is killed except that he returns to the world until he dies, and none return except the ones who have reached the epitome of faith and the ones who have reached the epitome of disbelief. So over here we see that only those who have reached the epitome of faith and those who have reached the epitome of disbelief will be returning in this era, according to the narrations. And that's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about how the seventh covenant is a covenant of the souls. And what are the souls? The souls are these everlasting beings, these everlasting entities that cannot die, they cannot expire. And what they do is, yes, they'll enter into a body, but that body is not their permanent abode. The body is just like a vessel. It's like a t-shirt that they wear. Once that t-shirt has worn off, once that t-shirt expires, it's no longer usable. What do you do? Just like any other normal human being, you discard your shirt and you put on a new one. Same thing is with the souls. The souls, they discard their shirt. They discard their vessel that is no longer operating, and they put on a new one. So that's reincarnation. Reincarnation is the soul entering into the body and leaving the body upon death and entering into a new body at birth. So this is kind of like the 101 of reincarnation. And actually the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they prophesied that the Qa'im would pair up the people by soul lineage, by soul families. And this is something that we find in Bahar al-Anwar and in the book Al-Hafd al-Sharif, which is written by Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar, who he said basically that Imam al-Sadiq said, verily Allah chose between the souls in the shadows, then made it enter the bodies. So when our Qa'im emerges, he inherits the brother whom Allah chose in the shadows, and he does not inherit the brother from the physical birth. Know him from that, and whoever does, there remains upon him no further proof.
Yeah.
So the best way to identify the true Qa'im or the true Mahdi is if he preaches and talks about and reinstates upon the people an old belief which they lost, which is the belief of reincarnation. And subhanAllah, what do the narrations also say about the Qa'im or the Mahdi? It states that he's called the Mahdi because he calls people back to a matter that they lost. He reteaches them that which they had forgotten. And that's what we find Abu Salih doing, not just in terms of reincarnation, but everything else, really.
Yeah, exactly. And he's providing this knowledge basically that has been like revealed very little. He's providing this knowledge of the soul, how it functions, how it works, how karma works, just the whole process basically of reincarnation, that, human beings, we basically accumulate karma, either positive or negative karma. And this is basically kind of a currency for us going into our next life, It enables us to, if we have a lot of good karma, this enables us to get better bodies. We have like a better choice of bodies to go with, and the same if someone has negative karma, they have less of that currency. And he also explained that the souls, because there are more bodies than there are souls, right? Right now, the world that we're living in, there's more bodies than there are like all of these good and bad souls. So the soul has like several bodies to choose from in each incarnation, and it will choose the one which is closest to it. Abu Sadiq, from whose piece, has said that it will choose the one that has a nature which is closest to it, rather. Abu Sadiq, he said that, for example, a soul that wants to engage in a particular like good or bad deed will choose an ego that also wants to do that, So like he said, he used the example, like if a soul is a bad soul and it wants to engage in like fornication or something like that, it's not going to choose the body of a nun. It's going to choose like the body of someone who also wants to engage in that, so it can carry out whatever deeds that it wants to carry out on the earth. So it's the same with the believers, the believing souls they're going to choose the bodies that have the nature of a believer, that have a nature which is going to be suited in order for it to carry out what it wants to do. Because, the believing souls, what they want to do is to establish a divine just state. They want to support the Qaim, they want to be with him. That is really the only reason they have returned in this day and age. So the believing souls, for sure, they're only going to choose a body which is going to enable them to do it. And just like the evil souls who have returned in order to fight the Qaim, they're going to choose a body which is going to enable them to do that. It's something which is very interesting, and he did explain that the soul is not tied to the body, because the traditional idea of reincarnation that most people who believe in reincarnation have is that the soul, it stays in one body for the whole lifetime. It comes in at birth and it leaves after death. But Abu Sadiq, from whom his piece, he's explained that this is not actually the case, and there's also evidence in the Abrahamic scriptures that this is not the case. So the souls, they can enter into a body at any point of a lifetime, actually, and they can also leave. If the body is no longer suited to what that soul is there to carry out, then the soul is not going to stay. It's going to find a more suitable body for it.
Yeah, and it's a very complex thing to go over, because many people already struggle with this aspect of reincarnation anyway. But that's something that I guess maybe we could finish up talking about, or maybe we can expand on it another time, because there's a lot that goes into the souls, and we actually still don't know that much about the soul. We only know very little about the soul, and there's so much more. Like, for example, one thing that I remember Abu Salih teaching us was, and there are some people that maybe laugh about it, right? Some people laugh at the idea about reincarnation, and that, the way to find out who the Qa'im is by teaching, or his teaching of reincarnation. But if people find that funny, well then, how did the angels also recognize Adam? Not only did God point out and say, hey, I'm going to establish a caliph on the earth, he made it a point by having Adam alayhi salam teach the angels their incarnations.
Yeah, he taught them all the names.
He taught them all the names, and Abu Salih said the names that they were being taught was their past lives. So it was a big proof upon the angels that the greatest proof that Adam was chosen by God, besides God's words that he was going to pick a caliph upon the land, was that Adam was able to identify them correctly. And that's what the Qa'im does. He's able to identify people correctly and pair them up correctly according to their soul lineage and soul families. And and he's able to name a person by who they were before. He can look at a person and say, Iyad, you are Muslim bin Aqil, as he had in that episode, saying that Muslim bin Aqil came back as a believer today whose name is Iyad. And many other believers such as that. So Muslim bin Aqil, we believe, is back. We believe that Imam al-Hussein, peace be upon him, is back. And there's actually many narrations talking about the return of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
Yeah, that he was the first one to return, basically.
Yes,
which he was.
Yes, that he would be the first to return. And yeah, it says over here, and it's a hadith by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, where he said that the first to emerge from the earth, so the first to emerge from the earth and return to the world is Al-Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. So we have that narration very, very clearly talking about reincarnation. We also have a narration from of Tafsir al-Qummi, who in the book in volume 2, page 147, where Imam Zayn al-Abidin, the fourth Imam, had said, "Verily, he who has given you the Quran will surely bring you back at an appointed time." And this is in Surah 28, verse 85. And the meaning behind that, because subhanAllah, I mean, like, that's incredible. Verily, he who has given you the Quran will bring you back at an appointed time. The Ahlul Bayt, they said about this that your prophet, meaning Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, your prophet and the prince of the believers and the imams shall return to you. So there is this process of reincarnation that they're talking about once again. And Imam al-Baqir, the successor of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, said the same thing. He said, "Verily the Prophet of Allah and Ali alayhi salam shall return." So there's a plethora of narrations. There's just so many narrations that we can go off on talking about reincarnation. But okay, I think we're just going to have to put this by side for now, because I think one of the things that people struggle with, especially Muslims who don't believe in the 12 Imams, is that all of the evidences that we're providing so far, unfortunately for them, they say we can't take this evidence because it is from the Shias, it is from the Ahlul Bayt, we don't accept from it, so then we're kind of like stuck. Now it's kind of like we would have to now go back. For example, at least the Muslims, they say that Judaism was correct. Is there reincarnation in Judaism?
Yeah, for sure. You know, there is evidence of that, you know, and there's also reincarnation in Christianity, you know, and there's also evidence of reincarnation in the Quran, you know, and one example that Abu Sadiq, from him his peace, is given from the Bible is when Jesus, you know, he was speaking to his disciples basically, and he asked them, who do people say the Son of Man is? And they reply, you know, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And then he says, but what about you? He asks, who do you say I am? And then Simon Peter, he answers, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. So this is from the book of Matthew in the Bible. So it's very clear that the disciples, they were expecting John the Baptist, who'd only died like a year before. He'd only died very recently, you know, and they're expecting John the Baptist. They're expecting Elijah or Jeremiah, the other prophets, to return, you know. So they had this concept in their minds basically, and there's no other real explanation of this particular verse that's been given that makes sense, you know, apart from the fact that they were believing in reincarnation.
Yeah, so that's a Christian idea, right? It's a Christian idea, but I guess when we look at it from the lens of the people of that time, we can easily see that, well, the disciples, they were Jews. And the Jews, clearly, they had this idea of reincarnation, that the Son of Man, who they are saying is Jesus, is either Elijah, or he's John the Baptist, or he's Jeremiah, who has returned.
Yeah.
So over here, we can see clearly that reincarnation exists in Christianity. And it's even confirmed, because the thing is that Elijah was sent up to heaven. And the Jews, they said that we're waiting for the return of Elijah, and that according to the prophet Malachi, Malachi says clearly that before the great day of the Lord, Elijah would appear. And they believe that, according to their interpretations, they said that Elijah would be the one to point out who the Messiah is.
Yeah.
And John the Baptist did point out who the Messiah is. He pointed out who the Messiah is in the book of John, or the Gospel of John. And Jesus makes a very interesting point about John the Baptist. He says, well, if you guys were waiting for Elijah, Elijah has already come. And then he pointed at John the Baptist. So the Jews did have an understanding of reincarnation. And if anybody says that this is an invented thing and that the Jews did not believe in reincarnation, actually it's according to the Jews today, those who have studied Judaism, those who have studied the Torah, the Tanakh, those who go back to the rabbinic scriptures, the Midrash, those who study the Kabbalah, all of this put together, many of the Jews who are religious know and they're aware of reincarnation. It's not something debated upon amongst them. And one thing that they even use as a proof, the Jewish people, is the book of Job, Prophet Job or Prophet Ayub, as mentioned in the Quran, where Ayub or Job says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return." I mean, how are you going to return to your mother's womb naked unless you're born again or unless you are conceived again? Unless you are a germ or a single-celled organism that reverts back to a single-celled organism and enters upon the womb of his mother. This can only be, realistically, if reincarnation is such a belief that existed amongst them.
Yeah.
So we see it now in Judaism, this aspect of reincarnation, that a past prophet, a past wise man had mentioned reincarnation briefly. You'll find in Christianity that the disciples have this understanding of reincarnation, even to the point that reincarnation can be seen as a punishment, or that reincarnation can be seen as you having a body that is suited for a particular punishment. For example, the blind man. They stumbled across a blind man and they asked Jesus, "Jesus, what did this man do that he was born blind?"
Yeah, that's a really good example too.
Did he sin or did his parents sin? So they already had this understanding that maybe if a person's born blind, Jesus, like, what did he do in his past life that made him born blind?
Yeah,
So,
and they had the concept of karma, basically, that they were talking about, that, like, clearly something had happened, either his parents had done something or he'd done something that had caused him to be born blind. Yeah, it's very clear that this was all existing. There's also the concept of raising up of prophets, which is mentioned a few times in the Bible. The prophets are talked about being raised up, which means they died and they were raised back up, There's no other explanation for that. And yeah, we also have, in the Quran, there are actually verses of the Quran which are talking about reincarnation, but these verses have been misinterpreted. The true meanings of them have actually been lost. So there's verses which is like we were talking about earlier. There's the potential, as a punishment, a karmic punishment, people can be reincarnated into animals, or they can be reincarnated into inanimate objects. So there's verses in the Quran which are saying, be iron, and this is what it's talking about. It's talking about this incarnation into inanimate objects. There's also another verse which is talking about being reincarnated into animals, where it says into cattle, basically, where it says, it's as if they're being driven to their death while they look on. So the people, they don't really have, the people today, who are just studying the Quran without the man who's appointed by God, they don't really have the true meanings of these, and there's many mentions also in the Quran of being resurrected and being brought back to life when someone has died, and this is always talking about reincarnation. It just goes to show, what Abu Sadiq was talking about the other day, about this narration from the Ahlul Bayt, which actually says there's no more book which is more misleading than the Quran when it's away from the Imam of the time, the one who's appointed by God in every day and age, who's actually the only one who's specifically able to interpret it, because it's just sort of left open for anyone to come and interpret it, and this is how the true meanings of these verses have become completely lost.
Yeah, we can, and also there's even this aspect of be apes and pigs despised. So that's actually in the Quran. You'll find it in Surah Ma'idah, verse 60, where it says, "Say, shall I inform you of what is worse than that as a penalty from God? It is that those of whom Allah or God has cursed and with whom he became angry and made them apes and pigs and slaves of Taghut." So over here, did God really take a people and metamorphosize them on the spot into apes and pigs? This is the understanding that some Muslims have, but in actuality, what would happen is that these individuals would pass away as human beings and they would return back to life as apes and pigs and other various animals, and iron, as you said. But another thing too, right? It's not just only animal form; it's also even human form. A person can come back as a human, according to the Quran. And I'm referencing the surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the second surah of the Quran, the second chapter of the Quran, verse number 28. And it says very clearly, the translation that they use is lifeless, but it's actually death. And I'll read it for you. How can you disbelieve in Allah when you are lifeless, but, let's use the word dead for now, and I'll explain why. And He brought you to life. Then He will cause you to die. Then He will bring you back to life. And then to Him you will be returned. So here's the thing, that the word used for death, for lifeless, is a mistranslation, because the Arabic word used is amwatan. Amwatan, comes from the word maut, pretty much, which means death. So God is actually talking about reincarnation here if we read it properly, where He says, how can you disbelieve in God? How can you disbelieve in God when you were dead and then you were brought to life? So you were dead, and how can you be dead unless you died, unless you were alive and then you died? So then God says, how can you disbelieve in God when you were dead, and then He brought you to life, and then He will cause you to die once again, and then He will bring you to life, and then to Him you shall be returned. So some people might say, and I'm a little bit prepared for this, some people might say that no, the correct translation would be lifeless. Why? Because their scholars said so. Well, if that's the case, if we go to Surah Imran, the third surah of the Quran, ayat 169, the word amwatan is used again. But for some reason, they don't translate amwatan as lifeless. Strange. Let's read the translation. It says, and never think of those who have been killed in the way of God as dead. As dead, not as lifeless, but as dead.
Yeah.
So why are they picking and choosing translations? And subhanAllah, what does it say here? And never think of those who have been killed in the cause of God as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord, receiving provision. So subhanAllah, how you are lifeless or you are dead and you're being brought back to life. Over here in the Quran, it says, don't say about those who have been killed in the way of God that they're dead. They're seeking provision from their Lord. So how do they seek provision? Well, they come back to life, right? So in actuality, the Quran actually hints towards and actually demonstrates reincarnation. The Ahlul Bayt use the Quran to verify that reincarnation is true. But for some reason, the Muslims don't believe in reincarnation. But why? Not because Prophet Muhammad said it's false, not because the Ahlul Bayt said it's false. It's because the scholars of Islam, the traders of Islam, the very people that Prophet Muhammad warned about and said, from them the fitna came and to them it will return, these scholars corrupted the religion. They're the ones who hid away this knowledge about reincarnation and made sure that the populace did not believe in it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only explanation, and that's the only reason why Muslims don't believe in reincarnation. It's because of the scholars and their false interpretations.
Yeah, it's sort of seen as this sort of mystical, esoteric kind of belief that's like very alternative, and has nothing to do with the true religion, when the actuality is that it's actually always been a part of the truth. It's always been a part of the Abrahamic beliefs. And yeah, it's a very important part of the religion to have. It's an important knowledge to understand, because it helps us to understand where we are. And if we think about God as like a merciful God and a loving God, the idea that we only have one life, it's like it doesn't make sense. God wouldn't be merciful if we only had one chance. Because we can look at the world today and we can see that everyone is having different chances. Some people are born with life on easy mode, some are born with life on hard mode. Some people have they're very close to the truth when they're born, and some people are very, very far away from God. They don't even have a chance to learn about it in their lifetime. So the reality is that everyone has a fair and just chance. Everyone has equal chances, to get to the truth and to understand what the truth is and to get close to God. And we repeat against several lifetimes. And Abu Sadiq from Hymns Peace has said that if someone is good but they're not on the true religion, they'll incarnate closer to it next time. And he also said that the souls, basically, they're either on a path of elevation or they're on a path of degeneration. So the soul will either become better across lifetimes, or it's going to get worse until it reaches either its point of ultimate good or ultimate evil. And that's when it will finish its incarnations and go to its final judgment day. And that's something that's, it's very important to know and understand, because like the majority of the situations that people are being born into now are because of karma. If they're born into a good situation, they have good karma. If they're born into a bad one, they have bad karma. And one like argument that atheists use against even the existence of God, in the Abrahamic religions, is the story basically where in the time of Moses, where all of the Egyptians are killed, basically the firstborn sons of the Egyptians are killed as one of the plagues, like as one of the punishments. And they say, how could a just God kill these children? But the reality is this is actually a karmic consequence for the previous Pharaoh, who was the one who enacted this punishment on the Israelites to prevent the savior being born, to prevent Moses being born, which actually led to the mother of Moses hiding him in the Moses basket, basically. So all of these children were actually killed by the Egyptians. So then the children who were later killed as Egyptians were actually reincarnations of the people who'd done this, and that it was a really beautiful example of like the karmic consequences and like the perfect justice of God, basically.
Because when you read the story, actually, I mean, it's really creepy. It's like, hey, so, okay, great. The savior of mankind has come. The Egyptians, they oppressed the Israelites by unaliving and killing their firstborn babies. But then God is killing these firstborns of the Egyptians who had nothing to do with it. But then Abu Salih confirmed that no, they had everything to do with it because they were reincarnation of those soldiers who are throwing the babies into the waters and slaughtering them.
And without this explanation of reincarnation and karma, the story, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't allow us to see a clear picture of the actions of God, basically. And
it makes God look like a serial killer.
Honestly. Exactly. It makes God seem like a serial killer and unfair. And the religion seems something which is just like too hard to get it right. What about people who are born in remote locations and they never learn about religion? How is it fair for them?
I mean, people then don't have an equal opportunity to be guided. I mean, as you were talking about before, it's like, okay, well, if a person was born let's say, for example, Islam is a true religion, right? Well, somebody who was born in the Middle East in a religious family, for him, guidance is like this. It's like quick, it's easy. You're adjusted to it because you're brought up disciplined under it. But okay, maybe somebody who lives in, for example, Italy, who heard about Islam, but he was so invested in Christianity, and for him, like, there's propaganda campaigns that Muhammad married a 6-year-old, and like Muhammad is a warlord.
It's too difficult for them to change that much to get into it. So how can anyone who's believing in a particular faith that they think is the right one, think that it's fair, basically. And
it's very hard to change people's minds, by the way, when you're influenced so greatly by your environment and the false propagandas that people do, because there are many, unfortunately, there's a lot of online debates and debates amongst Christians and Muslims regarding Prophet Muhammad and Jesus and all these things, and they both come with pretty solid arguments. So then it's kind of like, what are they supposed to do now? Gamble their faith? But that's why we're saying, and this is kind of something that I think is important for the people to understand, that the only way to verify anything, the only way to know anything, is through the man appointed by God, and not seamless debates and discussions that sometimes lead to nowhere. If a person really wants to know what is factual and what is true, and they want a logical explanation for things, the best person to go to is someone from God. And that's what made a lot of people back in the day believe, because somebody would come to them from God who can point out these things. Like, for example, Abu Salih from him, his peace, he answered the Christians regarding Prophet Muhammad and basically exposed the false propaganda campaigns against him. It's a very conclusive argument that he's made. And
just the argument about reincarnation, all of the evidence that Abu Salih from whom his peace is provided, with the explanations that he's provided, it shows that this type of knowledge, is one of the proofs that he is appointed by God, and it shows that he is appointed by God. It shows that his knowledge is from God, because it's the only explanation that really makes sense with everything. All of the other explanations of these scriptures, it's like they leave something unexplained. It makes you uneasy when you hear it. It doesn't sit right. You're like, okay, well, what does it really mean? Like, why is it like seemingly kind of like riddles that don't make sense, you know.
Yeah.
So the only explanation has to come from the man who's appointed by God. He's the only way that we can get the truth, and this is why he is the only way to our salvation, you know. And this is why, you know, that the better we are in our incarnations, the closer we'll incarnate to him, to the Imam of the time in our next incarnation. And this is really what we're aiming to do, you know, to reach that ultimate salvation where we can enter into paradise. We have to be with him. We have to be with the man who is appointed by God in whatever day and age that we're in, because this is the only way that we can actually truly connect with God and truly know him.
Yeah, exactly. If people want a relationship with God, it has to be through a relationship that God chooses. It's on his terms. It's not on our terms. If it was on our terms, and by the way, and that's something that I think a lot of people can understand. If you have friends, or if you want to keep a friend, if you want to keep a relationship, there are compromises that you have to make sometimes. When it comes to God, God is not somebody who will always compromise with you. Actually, there is no compromise with God. If for God, it's either my way or it's the highway. And that's why we have this narration that says about God, where God speaks to his servants. He says, my servant, I want and you want. But it will never be except for what I want. Give me what I want and I will give you what you want. Make me tired over what I want and then I will make you tired over what you want. Until nothing except for what I want happens. So the pathway to God is on God's terms. It can never be on our terms. And the example I can give, and I think it's the strongest example for the Muslims at least, and for the Christians who take from the story of Adam and Eve that used to be a part of the Bible, we find that God commands the angels to prostrate to Adam. Because why? He blew his spirit into it. God is dwelling inside Adam. If you want a relationship with God, you have to have a relationship with Adam. Satan doesn't want that. He does not want to have a relationship with God through Adam, through this vessel, through this body. Then he tells God, he says, God, how? You created me from fire, but you created Adam from clay. Impossible. He said, let me prostrate to anything else. Let me worship you in my own way, and I promise you I'll worship you that the kind of worship nobody has ever worshipped you before. And God turns around and says, I don't want to be worshipped the way that you want to worship me. I want to be worshipped the way that I want to be worshipped. So, you know, if a person wants to know God in this lifetime and not always have to keep on repeating the cycle of reincarnation in order to better know him, he has to find the Imam of the time and with full force believe in him and support him.
Yeah, exactly. That is the ultimate and, you know, the only way that we can reach salvation, for sure. And this is the core of the religion, which is another thing that has been lost, you know. And, you know, the people, you know, time and time again, they have followed in the footsteps of Iblis when he rejected Adam. You know, they've rejected the Imam at the time. And this is how the knowledge of these aspects, you know, like reincarnation, has become something hidden. It's become something lost. And, you know, we've become confused and misguided, and we've followed all of these different interpretations about things, and all of these different sects and denominations of religions have just sprung up and diverted off in all of these different directions, and this is how we've got to the state of the, you know, the religions in the world today, and also the state of humanity, the state of the world, you know. So if we want to live in a better life, if we want to get to salvation, if we want to get to a better hereafter, but also if we want to get a better life in this world, you know, we have to be following the Imam at the time. We have to be following the one who is appointed by God, you know, in order to stop this like cycle of generating so much negative karma for ourselves, like generating our own misery and like negative feelings and suffering. We have to, you know, if we want to stop that and like be in a paradise on earth and in the hereafter, we have to be following the Imam at the time, because he is the one who is embodying those good qualities. He is teaching us how to be good. He is teaching us what is the right thing to do, and humanity is in need of that. You know, we don't have this understanding, we don't have the knowledge of the unseen, we don't have the knowledge of the hearts of human beings, you know, so we're in need of a guide, you know, in this way, you know, of like, you know, in order to understand like the reality, we're kind of blind, you know, so we need a guide. We need someone to show us which way, and that you know, that has to be God.
It has to be God. You know, and I think if anybody loves God, they will look for God. And, you know, the thing is that if you love somebody, you will recognize their voice. You will recognize their stance. And I think anybody who truly says that they believe in God and love God, listen to the voice of the Mahdi. Go to the Mahdi Has Appeared YouTube channel and go ahead and listen to his voice. and listen to what he has to say. Because I'm telling you, the sheep recognize its shepherd. And God says through the Prophet Zechariah that woe to the worthless shepherd who abandons his flock. And we refuse to believe, as members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, we refuse to believe that God left the world without a shepherd, because that would not be a good God. That would be Satan. Satan leaves us without a shepherd. And if he were to give us a shepherd, it would be a shepherd from him. And we don't want a shepherd from him. We want a shepherd from God. Anyway, that's all the time that we have left. We'll talk more tomorrow, inshallah, or I think the day after. Anyway, it was good talking to you all. Assalamu alaikum.